more or less specific. That's the way I put it. The continuum is multi-componential. It's not a simple one. It's multiple components. And it's all based around authenticity. So some aspects of it are going to relate to situational authenticity. Some aspects are going to relate to interaction authenticity. Now, if you accept that, it means that the issue of authenticity and specificity are just the same issue. It can be distinguished from other tests in terms of the domain represented and the demand of the tasks and the texts within it. So it's the reading test, which we'll look at in a while. The reading test should reflect the reading in the domain. It will also be different in terms of the cognitive processing that a person has to go through when responding to that task. And it will be different in terms of, it will be specific in terms of how the task performance is assessed. If we can say all of those other tests, then it's specific. The other thing we can always say about a specific purpose test, it should be a criterion reference test. Norm referencing doesn't work for a specific purpose. Very interesting. I was at this conference at the weekend. I was talking, we had one session on this similar area. The guy before me was from an aviation English testing company called ETA, ETA, based in Oxford, in the UK. And he had a very good point to make. It's one thing to know that I can give all my pilots this test. If I had a norm reference test, and I had 2 pilots in my class, and both of them were found to be the same, they might both be useless. They might be incapable of doing the job, but they may be the same. The norm reference test is only comparing one person to another, essentially. It's not saying that what a person needs to know to be able to do the job. Whereas a specific purpose test does have that line. It does say this person has the language to perform the job. So it has to be specific. A specific purpose test of any kind has got to be criterion. Let's have a quick think back about what we know. You know all this stuff, I'm just telling you what you know already. Every test is specific. It goes from not very specific to very, very specific. So a not very specific test would be, very, very specific test would be ETAC, which is the test of language for pilots, which is, it's almost like a codified test. They literally speak their own language. It's amazing. You know, this guy, Henry, was playing some interactions between the pilots and ground. He knew it was English. So but there was one other interesting aspect of it, and that is any specific purpose domain will have a core language or use of language. So language is used in a very precise and particular way within that domain. And so but we also have language that's used in that domain, but it may be used in other domains as well. So it's sort of shared, if you like, it's sort of a semi-technical language. And the degree to which it's shared can change, depending on the actual language. Until we get to the general language domain, which is the kind of language that we can share when we speak on any subject. So, any specific purpose domain is going to consist of all of this stuff. General language, semi-shared, and core. That's a fact. It's identifying the core as accurately as we can. That's the whole focus of doing a needs analysis. That's what we need to be able to do to ensure that our test is actually somewhat specific. The other thing we know is that any test is going to lie within this continuum if it's very, very, very highly specific. In other words, a test of technical jargon only, with no general purpose language at all, is going to be here on the right-hand side. It is going to have absolutely no technical language of any kind is going to be on the other end. Now, it's very difficult to imagine a test at either end of the continuum. So most tests are somewhere along the line. So they contain a bit of one and a bit of the other. That's a fact. That's the way we always do it. So often, even in a general purpose test, we have some specific, we might have a reading text on Indo-Chinese mushrooms or something like that. And we might pick a really weird, strange topic to control for background knowledge. But there may be out there on the planet some experts on Indo-Chinese mushrooms. For them, it's a highly technical paper. So we are going to have some degree. And of course, we know from this diagram that the more specific it is, the less generalizable. So if I give you a test of airline jargon and you pass, I can't say whether you would be able to come to the pub and have a chat about football with me. I have no idea what your general language is like. All I know is that you know the technical terms. In the same way down here, you might have beautiful English. Somebody like Winston Churchill had an active vocabulary of something like 80,000 words. I bet he couldn't guide it plainly. So when you think about it, a test is going to be somewhere along the continuum. Now, what's happened over the years is in specific purpose testing, tests have moved down from right to left, and they're continuing to move. We have a situation now where we don't really have specific purpose testing. You can read for yourself. It's a disaster. Bad news, more bad news, a little bit more bad news, more bad news, and really bad news if you're science and technology. So it doesn't exist anymore. Not really. Let's have a very quick look at this. I did a small study. Took these exams, IELTS, IBT, PTE, and T. Took the reading tests and analysed them using lexical profile, which is freely available on a website called Complete Lexical Tutor. Anybody in the planet should be using it. You can't write the test without it. Lexile and mean log word frequency, which is from lexile.com. There's a free, very useful bit analysis that you can use. I recommend it to anybody who's selecting texts for use in a class, for assessment or for teaching. They're both free. You literally put your text in, hit a button, out it pops. There are more that you can use that are very useful. One called Co-Matrix. Very useful. Anybody has any questions, okay, this just grab me later and ask. I did a vocabulary profile. This tells me how many of the words are in the top, the most commonly used 1,000, 2,000, 2,400, 4,000, and the academic word list. That's a typical academic text. There's the IB TOEFL, there's the PTE, there's the IELTS, and there's T. Only T reflects the original. Nobody else does. That's interesting in itself. That's telling me that the vocabulary profile, the texts that are used in language tests for academic purposes don't reflect the academic text. Lexile data, that tells me that there's nothing happening there. Mean log word frequency, there's something happening, not a huge amount. We'll look at comparisons. This is interesting. University texts, online references, online newspaper, work paper, academic papers. You'll find all of the other stuff at lexile.com. I added the last column because I did some research of my own. There's a small corpus of academic text. And then I put all of these texts from the exams through to see where they came. T was up there, very helpful. Suggested that even on the weakest level of the sample of reading from T, you're well into the academic degree. So it's likely to be able to tell you something about the reading that a person actually does. Pearson is quite a bit lower. One of the Pearson tests, when we actually analysed it, there was no academic word at all in the text. Which is frightening. I've taken texts from ordinary tests, any test, FCE, other mainstream, and you'll find 4 or 5% academic wordless. This was one but not. Right. I have very narrow but quite low. IB total much better but a bit broad. So it might depend on the text that you get, that's the point. Some of the tests you get very clearly are testing the language of the domain, others may not be. Clearly not actually. If you look at the bottom, if you get that text that relates to that line, this gives you the broad range that we found. So if you could, it's quite possible that some of the text will be under the domain. The interesting thing was then that in England there's a big debate now as to what level you need to be to go to university. And the big argument that the UK Border Agency are saying is that you need B2. B2 is defined by Cambridge exam. But if you look at their exam at B2, it's FCE. Where does FCE come, would you say, on my fancy diagram?
I'm sorry, can you explain what you mean by lexile? Is that
lexile is a sort of standardized measure of the lexics of a text. The idea being that it gives you an idea of the lexical difficulty of the text. If anybody uses IB TOEFL, you can go to lexile.com/TOEFL, put in your reading score, and that will give you a lexile score for an individual candidate. The lexile score, then what you're supposed to do is you say, right, this is where I am. I should then be looking for texts that are 50 points above to 100 points below. I should be reading texts that are in that range of lexical complexity. Otherwise, I'm not learning. It's a very interesting system. It's definitely worth checking out. Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
I'm just curious about the lexile comparisons for spoken for academic presentations or places. Would they be similar or more?
I don't know if you've ever heard of a guy called Douglas Adams. Douglas Adams wrote the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.